Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our public meeting for the Villages of Carmel property. We'll get started here in about a minute or so to allow more people to jump on.
While we're waiting, just want to give everybody a notification. The Parks and Recreation Department is working on our system-wide Parks, Recreation, and Trails Master Plan. This is the plan that helps guide the department for the next 10 plus years. Master plans are typically updated every 5 years and rewritten every 10. But it will serve as a guiding tool for the department for the next 25 years or so. This is your opportunity to provide input similar to what you're doing tonight with the Villages of Carmel property for the entire city park system that includes trails, facilities, and our green spaces. So please visit our social media pages as well as our website, dentonparks.com, or the city website, and be on the lookout for upcoming community meetings and surveys. We do have a survey live right now that you can provide some additional input. We hope to have the plan approved and adopted by the end of the calendar year.
Perfect. It looks like we have enough people. So once again, welcome to our public meeting for the Villages of Carmel property. My name is Chris Escoto, and I'm a supervisor with Denton Parks and Rec Department. Thank you for joining and taking the time out of your evening to join us. I will be leading us off with some ground rules and introductions this evening. Tonight, I am joined by our Parks and Recreation Director, which you already heard from, Gary Packin. We have our Assistant Director, Drew Huffman, Parks Planning Manager, John Whitmore. We do have an American Sign Language interpreter joining us today, Rita Wedgeworth. Last but not least, we have our consultant members for Valley Quest Assigns, Jeremy Bladd and Michelle Davis joining us tonight. If you are joining us from a mobile device, please change your display name to your personal name to protect your phone number. During tonight's meeting, if you happen to have any questions, you will be able to ask them anytime by using the Q&A button on the bottom of the Zoom screen. We may not be able to get to your questions in the middle of the presentation. However, our team will be monitoring the questions and may be able to respond to your question in text format. Once that presentation is over, we will answer any remaining Q&A questions, and we'll open it up to the group for any verbal questions you may have. To ask a question, we simply just ask you to select the Zoom hand raising feature located in your Zoom browser settings. These questions will be answered in the order they are received. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jeremy and Michelle to introduce those conceptual designs that we have for you as they have that great presentation for you tonight. Jeremy.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Just a brief note. I'm Jeremy Bladd, joined, as Chris said, by Michelle Davis, who have been working on this project. We're Valley Quest Design. We're a full-service landscape architecture firm based here in Denton, and we're very pleased to be working on this project and meeting with you all tonight. So first off, just a quick display of the entire city to orient anyone who may not be familiar exactly where this project is located. You can kind of see the big star there down in kind of the southeast sector of the city of Denton. Kind of nestled there between the lake and Interstate 35. A brief project summary. Don't worry, I'm not going to read all of this text or go through everything that you see here. You're welcome to kind of read it a little bit here, but you know, we did want to touch on some important elements of the project and kind of what we were tasked with as we met with the city folks and started to learn about the site and understand what it was we were trying to do. So we've kind of put in bold here some of the more important notes. Obviously, Denton is a wonderful community. We certainly love it here. And being a vibrant and growing community with a lot of opportunities and a lot of room for many people's interests and passions. You know, we know that the outdoors is one of those, and I really, of course, want to bring that through in this park project. As Gary mentioned, a new parks, recreation, and trails system master plan is underway. And of course, this is one of the parks that will be featured there. And as a result of some of those studies, you know, this is one of the first ones to sort of come to the forefront and come before you tonight. Moving on to the objectives, you know, there's a few bullet points there, and I did highlight the note. Hopefully, a lot of you may be familiar with the site. Is heavily wooded. It is basically a pretty thick forested area. It has been used for agricultural uses, as evidenced by the barn that's there, and some of the other things that we found on site. But our tasks are to you know, gather information in any way that we can. One of the big ways we do that is through meetings like this and public involvement, and coordinating with the adjacent neighborhoods. A big task with any park or any public project is the connections that are made. Of course, connecting with the existing transportation system and the basically whatever environmental or social fabric that surrounds the park. Multi-use trail facilities is pretty much always a big goal for the Parks Department, and being able to make those connections for pedestrians, not just vehicles, or hopefully pedestrians over vehicles. A big factor here is the topography. As we'll be able to see on some of the graphics that we get to, there is some grade change over the site, and of course we want to use that as much as we can and respect it as well. And it is also sometimes a constraint in you know, as we try to make everything accessible for everybody. We want to be very respectful of the environment, of native vegetation, not use a lot of water, for example, in the landscape design, and tax the infrastructure more than is needed. And of course, to be innovative and unique in our design. Now, what does it, we always try to kind of distill those things down into what our principal goals are, and we came up with 4 of them. You can see there on the right, which is definitely to preserve the existing cross timbers habitat, and especially the post oak woodland that's found on the site. Post oaks are very sensitive trees. They're, many of them, very large and you know, very valuable from a landscape point of view. We want to create small areas of active recreation, usually in the form of playgrounds and such, but also to allow for flexible passive recreation, such as picnicking or just sitting, contemplating, watching your children play, you know, whatever might that form that might take. And then, of course, as mentioned earlier, develop the multi-use trail system and make those important connections. So hopefully we've met or touched on these goals, and of course we'll be looking to you to let us know if how we did with that. Some more in-depth overview of the site, zooming in now to the actual location there at the corner of Edwards and Swisher. We've tried to show some what we felt to be important background information for the surrounding land uses. A lot of obviously residential in this area. This is really a residential neighborhood park. mainly meant to be accessed by those living in fairly close proximity. And that's what you'll kind of notice there in the bottom right corner, this map that kind of shows the walking distances, I guess, available, that this park will be available to villages of Carmel, obviously, the preserve at Pecan Creek, and other rural residential, and even some apartments there to the northwest. As I mentioned previously, you can see these sort of very light white lines that you see running across the site. Those are contours, and each one of those represents 1 foot in elevation drop. And so the closer those get together, the steeper we are. So you can see there is quite a bit of drop across this entire site. You know, a good 20, 25 feet in some places from one end to the other. A few other contextual notes. There is a proposed or potential future arterial road, Post Oak Boulevard, that may at some point come up adjacent to the site there to the west. And so we've, you know, definitely aware of that and tried to be cognizant of that as we design. As I mentioned earlier, there are just a few existing elements on site. There's a barn, there's a small pump house, old pump house, I believe. There's some sort of, I guess, piles of materials and things sort of left behind from the previous owner and user. So we'll get into that a little bit more later. And then a few existing roads coming up into the site. This is a diagram, something that we like to do before we get real detailed, just a way to understand what we're trying to accomplish and sort of graphically show that. And obviously a big feature of this is the circulation around the site, showing you know, the ways we can connect to the adjacent roads or sidewalks, the adjacent neighborhoods. One thing that you'll notice, and this starts to take into account that topography and those existing trees. So obviously this is a very circuitous route and kind of goes in and out. And so what you're seeing there is an actual representation of the areas that we found on site to be kind of available for that because of the existing trees and the topography. The paths are really going to need to work their way around and through the trees as we try to not disturb the trees root zones and damage and definitely not remove any of those trees is one of our main goals. You'll see a couple of different options from us tonight. So this is the first option, and this one we'll get into more detail, but is centered around that existing barn and shows how we feel is possible to make use of that existing barn. And you'll see some of those images later, but then it just kind of creates this centrally focused play and picnic and rest area. You will notice off to the right-hand side a possible location for a small parking area off of Swisher as well. We don't see that there's need for a huge parking lot or a lot of cars, and it is a primarily pedestrian-focused park, but we feel like there would be maybe some need to have a small parking area to take the pressure off of some of the existing residential streets. I'm going to go ahead now and turn the time over to Michelle.
Yeah, so this plan is showing a little more detailed look at the diagram that Jeremy just showed. And it'll have the same kind of path and trail that winds through those trees and really works with that natural canopy and topography. Some things worth noting is you will see that ghosted in future right-of-way for the Post Oak Boulevard. We wanted to go ahead and show that and show a ghosted in sidewalk connection, just so if and when that gets built, there will be a connection from that sidewalk into the park. And then also you'll see some wildflower pockets scattered throughout the park. And this is really playing with those open areas that are within the tree canopy, just to bring some more vibrance and life into the park. And then the centralized design is where you'll have your primary and secondary playgrounds. And then also using that existing barn to create this refurbished pavilion that could create some really unique spaces and opportunities, which we're gonna take a little closer look at 2 different options with that. So to kind of go on to the next slide, this shows the overall canopy coverage for the park. And as you'll see, it is highly covered with shade. The playground areas will actually pretty much be completely shaded. And our main focus and goal was to really minimize the amount of trees that will be impacted. We wanted to try to not knock down any trees if possible. So you'll see as we go through into the more enlarged areas that we were really working with where those trees are to kind of create these shapes that the playgrounds and the trails take. So this would be option 1 for this type of playground treatment with this existing barn. And on this one, we're showing some more modern play equipment, some equipment that has some musical elements to it to bring in Denton's musical theme and the music of the wilderness, because this is such a forested area. We really wanted to play with that wilderness idea. And you'll see within this concept that we have some paving patterns that reflect like tree canopies, and then some materials like a raised wood deck into this refurbished barn that has that wood element to it. And then that would either step or ramp down into this more main picnic park pavilion area. And worth noting is we are just showing some like general furniture just for scale. This could of course have more chairs and seats within it. This is just kind of for scale purpose. And so something really neat that we're thinking with the refurbished barn is to cut away some of the sides of that barn and then to create this little bench seating area at a window cutout. So you could bring your children out to do their homework if they're doing remote learning. And so they could be in the sun and within the park and still be working on their computer. Or if you're an adult and you want to watch your children, but you want to be in the shade, you could sit at the raised seating and be able to look out onto the playground. And then also looking at the 2 different park options, again, these are very heavily designed by trying to minimize the impact on the trees. So that's how we got those shapes. And they will, of course, as you saw on the previous slide, heavily covered by tree canopy coverage. So you won't get too hot being out there because you'll have that nice shade from those post oaks. And so this would be option 1. And then kind of looking at the next one.
One quick note, if I can jump in, Michelle, and you'll notice this on the other options as well. We've tried to make pretty heavy use of boulders. There's quite a bit of existing stone on site, and actually stone that has been dug up or quarried from the adjacent residential community. Some of that found its way over here, and so the Parks Department finds itself with an abundance of nice big sandstone boulders that we feel like we can use to, if there's areas where we need to maybe step down in topography or make a quicker jump and retain some soil, we can do that. And that's kind of what we've shown here with some of the playground edges. And of course, children will almost naturally just play on the boulders and, you know, jump off them and things like that. So we feel like that's an important element that we're bringing into this.
Yeah, definitely would add like a fun element, and again with that naturalized foresty feel too as well. So this option, we're also proposing some modern equipment on this one, and you'll see that the playground layout is similar. But the difference on this one is for the refurbished barn, rather than having a more organic design like you saw on the last slide, this one would have a more linear, straight design with benches. It would still have that window seat cut out to look out onto the playground, but then it would ramp down into these different picnic areas with paving, and then also a little naturalistic picnic area that will be on some decomposed loose fill type of surfacing. So to give the mic back to Jeremy.
Yeah, so as we've mentioned several times now, the existing barn in this first option alternative that you've seen, we feel like can be used or reused, I should say. We have had a structural engineer out to review the site and look at the barn specifically, and it seems to be in good shape and definitely can potentially be reused with a few small additions or modifications. What these pictures here are showing are just different ways in which the barn can be treated and, you know, repurposed to more of a recreation and social setting. Obviously, some of these are not necessarily old repurposed barns, but maybe more built to look that way. But some of these definitely are older barns that have been converted. You know, in a lot of cases, maybe some of the side walls have been taken down to open it up and you know, make it a little more appropriate for a park setting and a little bit safer for that matter, as visibility is increased through the pavilion and into the site. We took the liberty of doing a couple of renderings, a couple of photorealistic renderings of the current barn out on site and how how it can be repurposed in some of the ways that we came up with.
Yeah, and so looking at this is showing where we would cut away that side of the barn to add in that window space. And then also, if you remember from that very first slide that Jeremy talked over, there was a additional section on that outside of that barn with some sides of the walls that were falling down. And so we would just take those away and add this little shed roof area that would allow complete visibility through the refurbished barn. So if you're on one side, you can see all the way through to the other side. And then we would also just treat it with some like new wood paneling on the side, freshen it up with some native landscape, add some stone veneer columns to like just spruce it up and give it a little bit new life to it. And so looking at the next slide, this is more of if you were standing in front of it and looking through. So again, this would create a visibility all the way through it. We would take away those walls that are existing and then raise up the sidewall on this left side, and then have that window cut out on the other side where there'd be the raised bench seating. And on this rendering, we're not showing any of the proposed seating or inside treatment to the barn other than just how the walls and visibility would look on it. And then we're also showing some of those additional structural updates that Jeremy had mentioned. We did have that structural engineer come out on site, and other than some very minor things, he did say that the barn was in really good shape. So this would be kind of addressing some of those items with like the knee braces and just adding a few things here and there.
Great. So one of our tasks obviously is to not necessarily right now, but at some point the decision will have to be made whether to keep the existing barn or not. And so obviously that's something we're interested in hearing from folks about. Moving on to design concept number 2. Obviously, the paths themselves are fairly similar to what you've already seen. And again, it's because of those existing trees and really just trying to be careful with how we work our way around those. The main differences that you'll notice is this concept does not retain the existing barn. And so because of that, we've kind of moved the focus a little bit to the west. We felt like if that pavilion was rotated and moved a little bit more over towards the Villages of Carmel neighborhood, that might provide a little more visibility, a little more draw into the site, and also make it visible, visible from the trail a little better. And then the playgrounds just respond to that again in kind of the available spaces that we found amongst the existing trees. Another small difference, we're just showing the potential parking area at the end of this street down here in the southwest. I don't remember the name of that street off the top of my head, but the residential neighborhood street there, and allowing cars to come through and be able to park there. Again, the parking is not necessarily tied to one concept or the other. I guess that could be interchangeable. We just wanted to show it 2 different ways.
Yeah, and so this is a more detailed look at that diagram that Jeremy just showed. And it's also showing that right away with the connection to the future sidewalk and the wildflower areas throughout it. And then what you'll see on this one is that we are utilizing that space where the barn used to be. And since there is some nice tree clearage there, having a bit of a bigger primary playground and having that pavilion and secondary playground situated closer to the villages for, as Jeremy mentioned, for better site visibility and draw into the park. And so we'll take a little bit of a closer look at that area. But again, this is how the tree canopy coverage would look. And again, the playground and the pavilion area would be very heavily shaded. And these designs are very influenced on minimizing the impact to the trees. So this is a closer look at what that primary playground area would be like. So with this, because we do have a bit of a larger space without having that existing barn there, it would give us room to have this playground with different age separation for like preschool age children and then also school age children, while still maintaining sight lines and visibilities for the supervision that'll be out watching and taking care of the children and playing. And with this design, we're also showing some more naturalistic nature play to really bring in that woodsy feel. And this pavilion would be a more prefabricated pavilion. It's kind of a standard one you see at a lot of parks. And but then also having this enhanced paved picnic area where you could sit out in the sun and eat food or watch your children play. And we have some of those climbing boulders on the secondary playground. But the primary playground would be accessible to any children who would want to go play on it. And then what you'll also see in this option is an amphitheater up on the north end. And this could be used to like take your children out and do story times in the forest, or have them put on like a little play, just like let their imagination start going with this and really just bringing in that nature play element for the kids. Oh, I think you're muted, Jeremy.
As Michelle pointed out, the pavilion on this one may be a little more standard. There's some unique things that can be done with a prefabricated structure, depending on the budget, obviously, but really this one's a built from scratch pavilion, most likely something that's a little more like you might see in a lot of parks. That, ladies and gentlemen, is all we have for now on the park. But of course, we're anxious to answer any questions and hear any comments that you all have.
Thank you, Jeremy. If you don't mind taking the presentation off, that way we can see everyone's lovely faces on here.
Let's see.
Should just unshare probably.
Yeah.
While he's doing that, folks, as a reminder, if you do have any questions, the way that we will be opening it up for questions either in the chat box, what we're doing right now, or you can ask them out loud. By doing so, you will need to click the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It does look like we do have one person so far, and that is Dion Moorhead. And if you can go ahead and ask your question, Dion, you'll have to unmute yourself. Dion, can you hear us? Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Please feel free to click the raise your hand feature on your Zoom browser. There is a question that if we will be providing a survey for feedback. Jeremy or Michelle, is that something that you guys have in mind to put together, or?
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Chris?
There's a question asked if there's a survey for feedback.
Yes, that is something that we've considered, and I think we have a pretty good template for that. And yes, we can provide that, I think, to you folks, Chris, and then see what's the best way to disseminate that.
Okay, if not, you can, guys, always send us an email and we'll be able to get that survey information collected. It does look like we have some hands here. Doug, if you can go ahead and ask your question, please.
He still needs to unmute himself.
Doug, can you hear us? All right, we'll come back to you, Doug. Joseph and Susanna Corville, if you could please unmute and ask your question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. A resident here in the Villages of Carmel, and been here about 13 years now. So one thing that, of course, we've been waiting for is that access road to kind of limit some of the cut-through traffic to our village, which kind of ties in with the park question here today. Was this land that was provided to us, was that part of the kind of the one portion back there that was still held by an owner, and was this just recently turned over to us?
This property that we're calling the Villages of Carmel property that the Parks Department owns was purchased in late 2018, I believe. It was purchased from a property owner. There is anticipated Post Oak Road to go through between the Villages of Carmel property and the park space that we're looking at tonight.
Okay.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess I was looking to see if the right of way was given for that portion of the Post Oak Road there. Was it connected to the property also?
we really bought that property to one. We noticed that, you know, we, with our needs assessment, we needed the Parks Department in the city. We needed a park in that part of town really to, you know, better our 10-minute walk initiative.
Mhm.
And then also to save those trees that
Right.
are on that property.
Okay. And the one question I have more regarding to the park is, and I think I've seen it come up in some of the chat questions with security, uh, maybe lighting. We do have a high density of trees. Uh, we think of the recent events that we've had around Denton here with kidnappings and stuff like that. And I noticed on your plan too, it showed a little better visibility to the access where, you know, people would be playing or picnic, you know, whatever they do there. Um, I'm guessing that, of course, we've factored in those security aspects, whether it's lighting, whether it's anticipation of a post oak access road there, which could be heavily traveled based on the number of cars that are cutting through this neighborhood, you know, from Edwards to Pocker's Page.
Yes, sir. And we did ask all those, and I'll start with this post oak question first. So we asked our engineering department when post oak was going to be ready to be built. They still do not know when it will be ready to build. All they could tell us is that it is on the mobility plan at this time. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that question on when. We're just going to anticipate, you know, through the construction of this park that that when or if post oak is ever built, then we will design safe passageways to cross between the Village of the Carmel property and the park space. And
Right.
then through design, when we design a park, and really when we work with consultants, you know, like Valley Quest, really, you know, they remind us, we remind them, when we design a park, we use crime prevention through design. It's called CEPTED. And it really has to do with how low vegetation or how high vegetation can grow, and then how high you need to trim the trees, and then where your lights need to be and where they need to shine to give you that optimal safety factor for during the day and at night.
Okay. And just one last question was, I guess, what's your feelings on who will utilize this park most? I know we have one neighborhood park uh, further up to the front of the subdivision that, you know, right in the neighborhood. But do we see smaller children in this park? Do we see a more adult, middle age, you know?
We would
'Cause, like,
design this park for everyone, including ADA accessibility. We already have a survey on the park. That means we went out. We know exactly what all our elevations are. We did a tree survey. We know exactly what type, size, you know, diameter trees that we have. So as we work with Jeremy and his group to design the park, we know exactly where we need to put all the aspects of the park. And when we design something, we want to design it from, you know, from a 6-month-old to, you know, someone 106. So, you know, we want everyone to be able to enjoy that park. We wouldn't, especially this being a neighborhood park, really to enhance that 10-minute walk. So the idea would be anyone living within a 10-minute walk. That's who we're really going after for this park. So, you know, really to sum it up, we would design it for just anyone and everyone that lives in that area.
okay, well, thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It looks like we have Kinsey. Kinsey, if you can unmute yourself, I've given you permission to mute.
Hi, how are y'all?
Doing good. How about you?
Good. So and you kind of talked about, Drew, there with it being a community focus within 10 minutes, but with Parks and Recs maintaining the maintenance and the upkeep of the park itself, and this is a curiosity question, is there any intention or goal with Parks and Rec Department utilizing any part of that park, especially with that nice barn there, as far as, resident versus non-resident revenue for, birthday party rentals, where the case may be? Would there be a possibility that there would be some outside factors that would be utilizing that area in the future?
We wouldn't anticipate outside factors of someone, for example, from Corinth to rent that future pavilion, whether it be the barn or any other of the options that Valley Quest showed tonight, or any other options that we come up with between now and the time the park is built. But that would be a pavilion open for rentals, and really with our stance and with our policies, we don't ask you, do you live within 10 minutes of that pavilion, or we do ask you if you're a Denton resident or not, but we would not tell you no if you wanted to come from Ponder or Justin to happen to rent that pavilion. So,
and then I guess my other question behind that is, would there be any foreseeable programming done out at the park? And that's just a curious question.
If there would be any programming, it would probably be directed to your neighborhood, because it's a neighborhood park. There's minimal parking. It would be something like, for instance, Jeremy and I talked when we were out walking around, we really see, and even with my family, more homeschooling taking place, especially with the pandemic. And, some people may stay at homeschool versus going back to school. We have a lot of homeschool parents that use our park for recess, and that's great. That's what it's there for, and that's what we want them to use it for. And then, with Michelle's idea of the amphitheater stage, you could have that to where you could have your outdoor classrooms, and you're not inside your four walls that you are, most of the day, especially with small children. So. To help answer that question, if it was programming, it would be designed to your neighborhood and draw residents from your neighborhood.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, Dion, I know we had some issues, and I'm not sure if the question that you asked was your initial question, but if you should be able to have access right now to speak. There you go. Dion, are you there?
Yes.
Yep, go ahead, sir.
Okay, one of my question is, how long will this project take? And would it be more of a traffic flow than it already is? Because I was considering that it's so much traffic from the trucks and other things. Is this going to be almost just strictly for the neighborhoods around Concrete?
Yes, sir. So to answer who the park is for, that would be just the neighborhoods in that area. So go back to that 10-minute walk. We really want to focus on people living within really it's a half mile. So, and then the timeline, we want to go after grants that are offered by Texas Parks and Wildlife and other national entities to help increase the dollar amount that we will be able to spend at this park. To be able to do that, we have to have a very nice package. We have to have, that's why we're here tonight, so you can help us pick all the options to be able to go in this park. We'll take all your information from now and later, and really work with Valley Quest to encompass those, opinions and what you want, what you don't want, what you want to see, and put that into a really nice rendering. After the rendering is done, we'll finalize it. We'll be able to put that into construction documents. And once that's bundled together, we'll have a really good idea of what our cost estimates will be. And then we'll be able to go after all those grants. And really it's almost like a competition when you're going after grants. The company city that has the nicest, package to be put forth before those boards that look at the grants, they decide on, where the money goes. So, we want to have our best foot forward when we go after those grants.
Okay.
So I'm sorry we don't have a timeline at the moment, but we do, want to. This is really a visionary plan on what we want for the future.
Okay,
So,
that's my question.
yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, looks like Brittany Gamble, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me? This is
Yes.
Justin. First off, I appreciate you guys putting all this together. I think it was all very informative, and I think it all looks great. One of our biggest concerns was already addressed in the chat. I guess was my questions regarding the road that's going to go directly. We live off Carmel Hills, which our backyard would basically face the park, which I think is a great thing. But the last thing we want to do is have a road backed up to our fence line. And, if we're talking about, you only want people within a, half a mile radius to be able to walk there. I just don't see the necessary, what's the reason for the road and the parking lot if we already want it to be a small community park. The last thing I want is all these trees behind our house to be knocked down for a road. And I think most people on my street would probably say the same thing.
I like we said earlier, I wish I could give you the timeline for the road. We really tried to get the answer. Our engineering department doesn't even know. They're going to have to do a lot of studying to really determine if that road is even needed in the future.
Okay.
And it may or may not be. And I wish I could give you an answer, but I want to be as transparent as I can with you. And I'm sorry, I do not know that answer, but
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
the road's a good idea. I just think there's another place it could be, not lined up with
And-
10 houses.
and you're perfectly, you are correct.
Okay.
Where it could go in a total different direction,
Right. And I just want to make sure that I address that. I know it's not decided yet, but that I know I'm speaking not just on myself, and I'm probably all my neighbors that are on the same street as well. So I know it's not anything that's decided, but I just wanted to say that and just make sure that was something that was being considered, possibly putting in a different place in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we had a couple questions in here that I'll try to answer versus typing them in. So how will the final design be decided upon? Valley Quest will put a survey together, and everyone that signed up for the link tonight will get that survey. And that way you can pick what option you like the best. You can put comments in there on maybe you wanted a blended option, or you had other ideas that we didn't show tonight. And then that helps answer the other question on the final decision on whether the barn will stay or a new pavilion will be built. We did look at the cost difference, and Jeremy, if you want to help me, it was almost the same. If we'll probably save a little money keeping the barn versus building a brand new one. It'll really all depend on what options the residents in this area pick, if the barn stays or goes. So as far as a person that grew up on a farm, it does serve for a very good, pavilion and really nice aspect to Villages of Carmel. Did I answer that correctly, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's true. And one, I guess, nice thing about the existing barn is it's quite large. We would probably be hard pressed to build a brand new pavilion quite that large for the same budget amount. So yeah, I mean, we could probably get the budgets to balance, but you might have, large versus small in some cases. And that obviously requires more study as we get into more detail.
Thank you. And we had a question on how many residents joined tonight. At the peak, there were 30. So, we can also send out other information in our social and put on our social media that, you can share with your neighbors to help us get even, the more the feedback, the better.
And just a quick note, I did put Becky DeVinny's email in the chat. The contact on the website that I posted for the mobility plan is old. That employee is no longer with the city, but Becky is our city engineer. And you could email her with a question or your concerns about Post Oak Road.
And Larry, I'm going to give you that's a pretty long question there. I'm going to go ahead and give you the opportunity to ask that if you don't mind.
I'm sorry, you want me to ask the question about the number of people or the?
You could ask both. It's just so you could get both of those answered.
Well, he answered the question about the number of people.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
And then I just had asked, will a link of this recording be available for us to share with our residents?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Question is, any dog-friendly features being considered? Again, I know Drew touched on a survey that's going to be sent out for anything that was left out. You can more than glad add that option to the survey that will be getting sent out. We do have emails to everyone who is in attendance. We will also send out an email through your HOAs so we can gather that feedback for those that were not in attendance and can go back to this video to look through that.
And Larry had a good question and concern about small children and really pests or critters, snakes. We would, when we design the park and when we maintain the park, I think I touched on that earlier with the, crime prevention through design, to really make sure that everything's lifted, and the trees are trimmed. You can really see into the park, so what's going on. And that really prevents any kind of bad things that happen. And we see a lot of times, if a space is activated, it reduces any illegal activity. So
great. It does not look like we have any other questions, guys. So actually there is Joseph and Susanna. You can unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay.
Go
Okay. Question, it sounds like we're going to have some type of irrigation in there, trying to at least limit it, it sounds like. So I'm guessing there will be facilities for water. And is there any plan for any type of restroom, anything like that going in? Or is it just, what's your expectations and with comfort features per se?
Yes, sir. We would have, a drinking fountain on site. We would do limited irrigation. Really, the good stand of trees that are there would really limit what type of landscaping we could add to the park. We would really have to pick, high shade tolerant plants to go there. On the restroom aspect, we do not typically put restrooms in neighborhood parks. So really, our small parks, they're designed, hopefully you can get back to your house, or, with my small children, we try to remind them, hey, you go before we leave. If there was a need for a restroom, we would really, take that need in from our residents, potentially put a portable restroom there, at least to start off with, if that need grew, and then really watch the need as the park grew and the number of residents grew to see if a restroom was really needed. Restrooms are expensive. They're expensive to build and expensive to maintain. So that's really what we look at in the neighborhood park. So I hope I helped I hope I helped answer that question.
Okay. Well, thank you again. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Does not look like we have any other questions, guys. So we do appreciate everybody, again, taking the time to join us tonight. We hope you like what we presented, and we look forward in showing you what we have next, and look out for that survey and any communication from Denton Parks on dentonparks.com or our Facebook page. So with that, thank you all, and hope you all have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending.
Many thanks to our signer, Rita Wedgeworth.
Thank you.